You guys are back again listening to Life in a Wine Bottle with your host, Nelson Pizarro. I have special guest speaker Eric Orange from localwineevents.com. In part one, the topic is wine marketing with Eric, and Eric gives us his background, how he got into wine, why he started, and what is local wine events. Don't forget, subscribe to our YouTube channel and iTunes, Spotify, Google Play, or like us and follow us on Instagram and Facebook at Life in a Wine Bottle. Enjoy the episode. Quick shout out to our sponsors, Castelli Family Vineyards, where you can taste the love of the wine. Follow and like them on Instagram at CastelliFE. Bespoke Maestro, they make elegant dresses and suits benefiting any occasion. Follow them on Instagram at Bespoke Maestro. San Diego Wine Tasting App. Easy to use, free to download, fun to find a new winery. Download the app today on Apple Store and Google Play. Search for San Diego Wine Tasting App. Local wine events. Discover local, unique wine, food, and drink events in your neighborhood. Make sure you subscribe to your email list at localwineevents.com. Now let's get on with the show.
Poughkeepsie. He had gone into the service with the idea of getting experience as a cook that would get him into the CIA, and that's what he did. So he was going to the Culinary Institute of America. He calls me up and says, "Come on up here." And I said, "Okay." And I just went up there and looking for something, and I found a job in a vineyard right outside of Millbrook, New York. There was a startup vineyard that a guy had put in up there, and they'd advertised looking for farm help. And I called them and told them I was from Kansas, and they just made that assumption that I
That you're a
knew
farmer.
farming. They asked me, "Can you drive a tractor?" And I said, "Sure. You show me how to turn it on and turn it off.
And that's
I'll
it.
drive the thing."
Yeah.
And I did. I spent 6 years growing grapes, learning how wine was made from the ground up, literally. And I enjoyed it, but it was farmer's work, and that's tough. I mean, I sometimes spent 16 hours a day on a tractor, looking behind me,
Yep.
and that just,
Yeah,
I
your
mean, at the end of
back,
the
your
day,
neck. It's like
I felt like a
incredible.
pretzel.
Yes, it's
And
so crazy.
yeah, and I had a neighbor. One of the neighbors of the vineyard there was an old time farmer, and this guy was just gnarled up and
Yeah.
like, I don't think I want to go that direction. So I started casting about, looking for other work, and I took a couple of short term jobs there in around Cascade. There was Cascade Mountain Vineyards wanted me to work over there, and I did that for a while. But at some point, I was like, you know what, I need to get an education. So I decided to go back home to Wichita and mooch off my dad while I attended school. And while I was there, I got a job as a wine steward at a private club in Wichita, and started, getting back into the wine business. And the next thing I know, I had an offer of a wholesale job as a wine rep in Wichita.
Okay.
Now, Wichita's wine business is not much. I mean, it's just a very small amount, but there is some. I mean, there's money. Wichita is a airline, basically an air factory. Boeing, Cessna, Learjet have all big plants there. So there was some wine business, and I had spent more time on a vineyard than any of my competitors, and had a little bit more in-depth knowledge of the way wine work. And I excelled as a wine rep in Wichita. And
Wow.
at some point, I was like, I got to get bigger than this. I got to go somewhere else. And I like the idea of going on a cruise ship, as a wine steward on a cruise ship. That to me was like, I could be sailing the South Seas. I don't
Really?
live in Wichita. Uh, so I started again casting about, looking for something. And one of the suppliers that I had at the time was Paterno Imports, which has turned into Terlato
Okay.
Wines International. At the time, it was Paterno Imports, and my rep in the Kansas area was a nice lady, and I got connected in and applied for a job as the district manager in Colorado, for Denver. Denver and the
Nice.
mountains, they said, and the mountains things really
Uh-huh.
appealed to me. That was almost as good as the South Seas. I'm thinking this will be fun.
Uh-huh.
So then I went out there and I was the district manager. My territory was all of Colorado, the ski resorts mainly. It was a beautiful job. I mean,
I bet.
we could, me and another guy used to joke, I can't believe they pay us to do this. I mean, they paid for my car, my gas, my lodging. They gave me
Oh,
an entertainment budget, a sample budget. I mean, my God,
wow.
and I had a good book of wines. I mean, I
Yeah.
had Rutherford Hill, Markham, Cuvée, I
Okay.
had Ruinart from
So you had
Champagne.
good product. Yeah, you
Yeah, I
had
had
good
all the
product.
Italians. I
Easy.
mean,
Yeah,
Santa
easy to sell.
Margherita, Frescobaldi, all of those. Everything was
Yeah.
great.
Yeah.
So it was not a hard job. I mean, all
Yeah.
I had to do was go up to the Aspen and say, "Hey, what do you think of this?
Yeah. I have
Would you
this,
like
this,
10
this, and
cases?
they're like,
I'll give you an
okay.
extra one.
Yeah.
And meanwhile, let's go ski."
Yep.
And it was just, it truly was a dream job. I mean, I was young, single, living life, and it still had job aspects. There were dipshits that I worked with. Excuse my language. I don't know if you edit out,
No,
but I worked with a
probably
bunch.
not, but go ahead.
I worked with a bunch of idiots.
Uh-huh.
What I considered idiots, and then I did a wine tasting one night for a singles club and met the love of my life.
Oh,
It
so
was kind of,
wine brought you together to
it
your
did
life.
indeed. It was kind of funny.
Wow.
I was living in Lodo in Denver, selling wine for Paterno, and there was this group called the Mile High Adventure Club,
Uh-huh.
and it was a singles club, and they did great marketing. I mean, it was, everybody was flooding into the state from out of state, and they're looking for things to do. They want to go skiing, they want to hike and backing, biking, backpacking, and this group was just that. Everybody was single, and the owners of the club lived in my building, and we had this beautiful area up the top of the building that looked out over the Rocky Mountains. It was just a gorgeous conference room that was always empty.
Mhm.
And they said, "Hey, why don't we do a wine tasting for our group?" And I thought, "Great, I'm single, so I
Yeah,
got a couple of my
and you
single
know a
buddies.
little bit. Yeah, you know a little bit about wine. Yeah.
Right? I got a couple of my single buddies, and I
Yeah.
put on a tasting that I had actually picked up from Tim Hanai, a master of wine that used to, in the early days, worked for Behringer. And
Okay.
he had constructed this little tasting where you taste 8 different food types with 4 different kinds of wines. And he gave it to me, the script of it, and
Right.
I performed it several places because I think it was really illuminating in terms of how wine and foods go together and the interactions that you can get
Pairing.
from
Yeah.
different flavors. And so I put this thing on, had 17 women and 2 guys show up from the club. So me and my buddy
So
were like,
you.
"Hello." And again, my wife Kate was the star of the show, I thought, and I got to meet her and talk to her, and then one thing led to another, and I got married. I was extremely happily married, and at the time, the job was starting to suck. Again, the Paterno's mo in the early days seemed to be get somebody in the market for 2 or 3 years. You know,
Rotate.
they rise, their paycheck raises, their budgets raise, and then after 2 or 3 years, get rid of them and get somebody young and hungry and start over again.
Yeah.
Seemed to be the way of it. I mean, every time one of my supervisors came out, they seemed like they were looking for reasons to get rid of me, and I was like,
Yeah.
I don't need this.
Yep.
Um, at that point, I just quit. I said, my wife was distraught. She's like, "Come on, this is a great job," because we'd go to Beaver Creek and Vale, and
Oh
I
yeah,
was selling all
yeah,
the fun
you're fancy.
restaurants.
Yeah,
And
you get
I mean,
into
it was
everywhere.
a really nice lifestyle,
Yeah.
but it was just, there was just really a lot of aspects about it that sucked. And so at that point, this was like 1999, and the internet kind of sprang to life that Christmas of that year. I mean, it had been around for
The
years.
dot com
Yeah,
really.
but Netscape had come out. People were starting to figure out what a browser was, and really, I kind of was thinking, how can I combine wine and this new thing? And I started looking around for ways to work it. And at the time, there was CompUSA. You remember those
Yeah.
stores?
I know
Well,
CompUSA.
they
Yeah.
used to do. They used to do. They for $300 you can get unlimited classes at these CompUSA's, and I lived within an hour of 3 of them. So I dropped $300 on this 3-month course, and I started going to every one of the courses they had. They had how to write HTML code, how to use the internet as a business, how to work Microsoft Excel and spreadsheet medias and all that stuff. And I was just going, for months. I did about 2.5 months, and during that time, I was looking at building a website. There was a local retailer who had stores in several states. So his ability to ship wine within those states was not as restricted as some of these other people who were trying to send it across state lines.
Mhm.
Anytime you start crossing state lines with alcohol,
Yeah.
you run into the 3-tier system.
There's
And the
yes.
difficulties of that are
There's
just
crazy. Yeah.
immense.
Even as a
So
small winery, it's pretty challenging to
I'm
get
sure.
stuff.
Are you? I mean, are you required to be licensed in order to ship it into cities?
Yes, you got to be licensed, and there's certain states that you can't ship anything to.
Can you
So
ship to Pennsylvania?
Pennsylvania might be one, yes.
Yeah.
I forgot there's a couple of them that you have to ship directly to a distributor, and then the
Yeah,
distributor, which means that they
yeah.
raise the
See, that,
price
that's
just.
and again, that's
Isn't
unworkable.
that crazy? Yeah, isn't
So
that crazy?
it
So as
is.
a
It's
small
unworkable.
winery, it doesn't
Yeah.
make sense, and or people live right on the border where you're at, and they'll go over to, let's just say Pennsylvania, and then they live in New York or something. You know
Right.
what I mean? So
Yeah.
and they
Yeah. Yeah.
so. But sorry for cutting you off. Go ahead. So then you got you're trying to figure out the basically the
Well,
whole
yeah.
internet scheme. You're basically
I was
figuring
trying to
out.
figure out how to combine at that time 15 years in the wine business. I mean, at that time, I realized I was pretty entrenched in the wine business. I had a lot of experience. I had sales, fine dining. I had it from the ground up. I mean, I had a lot of experience, but so and I could tell right away. I knew right away that selling wine online was going to be problematic.
Correct.
You're just not going to be able to get around that three-tier system too easily.
Yep.
So I started looking about, and I had. There was one of my local accounts was a big account, had stores in 5 different states. And I just made a proposal to him and said, hey, why don't we put up a website basically in each of these states,
Mhm.
and allow people to order wine. You can get it, you can deliver it within the state themselves. So he agreed, and we did it. It's called Lucas Liquors. He's still around. He had a big store in Littleton, Colorado,
Okay.
and so we started there. And one of the things that I did was because of my background as a supplier rep, I recognized that people were looking to find out about events, but there really wasn't any way to. I mean, at that time, the only way to market it was to, you had radio, newspaper,
Mhm.
which you had deadlines, you had to get to. You could print flyers, that kind of thing, but it was just difficult to get the word out. And I had done a tasting one night, and I had 6 people show up. And I
Mhm.
was like, man, how do you let people know that this stuff's going on? I mean,
Yeah.
people want to know that this stuff's going on. And
And before you move with beyond that, because I just thought it was kind of interesting that you were talking about the tastings. How big was the tastings for you guys? As in, was it a common thing that you did private tastings and had people invite people over?
Well, when I did them mostly for Paterno, we
Okay.
would have at the time there was marketing budgets that allowed them, the winemakers would come into town,
Hmm.
and the winemakers would come into town, and we'd go to local. The ideal situation was you set up something with a local retailer,
Hmm.
and he brought, he markets it to his wine people at
Okay.
a local restaurant very near the place, and everybody's kind of local, and it kind of works that way.
Hmm.
But again, getting the word out is really the difficulty,
The
and the
challenge
retailer
there.
doesn't take the real initiative.
Yeah.
It's kind of left up to me as a supplier rep. It's my winemaker in town. I'm going to look like shit if I don't have some people show up. And there I was, had a woman from France, fine dining, fine, good food, good price, everything, and 6 people showed up, and 3 of them were my wholesale reps. And it was like,
Okay. So
I
then
felt
you,
embarrassed. I'm like,
yeah.
just,
But you're thinking, like, that's your mindset. You're such an entrepreneur that you're saying, hey, how can we get this thing going?
be better than this. And all the
Yeah.
supplier reps like me in the market, we all experience the same thing.
Yeah.
So that's what I did when I opened the website for Lucas Liquors. I contacted all of the supplier reps that I knew in the market and said, "Hey, keep me updated on what you got going on. You got a tasting, whatever. I'm going to put it on this events list that I've created
Okay.
as a side page to Lucas Liquors." And I did that. I started collecting them, got emails from people telling me what's going on. I started posting them myself and getting them on there. And then Lucas Liquors didn't work because at that time he wanted really to up the sales, but it was
Correct.
difficult. It was difficult. There was no inventory system. There was no. I
Yeah.
mean, the whole thing was just a mess. And I proposed that if he spends $15,000 or $20,000 on some shopping cart software, we could get this thing to work.
Yeah.
And he instead, paid some guy $300 to put something in, and it was just. And so we both kind of just gave a nod and said,
Yeah.
that ain't gonna work.
It is what it is. You
Yeah.
guys learned
So
from.
at that point, though, I recognized that from the stats of the website, the events page that I had set up was getting a whole lot of traffic, and I just, from that point on, it was like, you know what, I'm gonna work this thing. I'm
Okay.
gonna, I'm gonna see I'm gonna see how to do it. So, meanwhile, Lucas and I left on good terms, and he was in the process of opening a shop in Houston, Texas, a second shop in Houston, Texas. And at that time, my wife, who was executive in the healthcare world, got an offer to take the Houston market.
Oh,
So I decided that I would go down and be the wine buyer. To me, that's as good an education in the wine world as you'll ever get. It's having people walk in daily with wines and taste you and tell you about them. I mean,
yep.
I, I'll do that. Oh yeah. So by the time we got, everything packed up and down there, he had bailed on the idea of the second store
Ah,
because he was running a lot of flack and it just wasn't working.
yeah.
So now here I am in Houston and I don't have a job and I start looking in the wine world. And at the time, again, I'm sitting on the internet and I'm thinking, this has got to work. It's got to work. So about that time, wineshopper.com popped up. There was, in the early days, it was Virtual Vineyards, I think was one of them. I forget the others. Wine.com was out there, but it was nothing at the time. And wineshopper.com recruited me to be a manager for the area, and they were trying to sell wine through the three-tier system.
Mhm.
And it was, again, difficult. I mean, we had meeting upon meeting upon meeting that was just, nothing but going around in circles about how you profitably get somebody to buy wine through the internet.
Mhm.
And the whole time, they're paying me and I'm doing nothing. We're all doing nothing. And so I even proposed to them. I was like, hey, wow, we're all out there. You had 50 or 60 guys like me, guys and girls like me in the markets right now, poised to sell wine. We're doing nothing. Why don't we start collecting events information?
Mhm.
And they were like, oh, that's good. We'll pass that to BizDev at the time. BizDev. Yeah, right. A bunch of yahoos didn't know
Yeah.
anything about wine, didn't know how. So I was like, you know what? I'm just going to try it. I went online. I found a programmer in Slovenia who had very good English, was very intuitive. I outlined my idea. He came back with some suggestions, and for $1,500, we went live with the first version.
Wow. Okay, so let's move on to that then. So what's the name? So you have local wine events
Right,
and the juice.
localwineevents.com, and then I have the Juice, which is the newsletter that
Okay.
is, basically they're one and the same. I mean, the events all are posted on localwineevents.com. We send it out weekly in the Juice to let people know what's coming up in their area,
Mhm.
and we did it specifically by area, by city.
Yeah, yeah.
You don't
Which
care
makes
if you're
sense. Yeah.
if you're sitting in San Diego, you don't care what's going on in Miami.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, the Wine Spectator at the time was the only thing close to any kind of competition, and that's what their list was.
Yeah.
Here's Maine, here's Chicago, here's Seattle.
Yeah.
It's like
And they all
so
have
my idea
different
was,
mindsets too.
well,
Like
it's just
what you know?
again, you don't care really
Yeah.
what's. I mean, you might be of vague interest what's going on in
Yeah.
Miami, but so I that was the idea really behind it was let's get local.
Mhm.
Let's stay within a certain area, and we made it so that people could post their own events. That's really the only way to manage.
Yeah.
Initially I would post them
You
myself because
wanted to, yeah.
that's kind of how I got it jump started. Really was I'd look at a city like Dallas. I would find a handful of events being done by some of the retailers there, and then I would email all the other retailers and say, "Hey, this is my site." And when they looked at it and saw that their competitor was on there already, then they jumped in and started
Yeah.
signing up too. And the restaurants picked it up right away. I mean, restaurants, everybody struggled with how to market an event. And suddenly here's this guy saying, let's all put them in one place. And it took off. I mean, it was a good idea. I worked it hard. I spammed the shit out of the wine world
Mhm.
in the early days before spam was even a thing. I figured out how
Every
Behringer.
day an email. Every day.
Oh, I mean, I had a database that I collected. I knew how Behringer,
Mhm.
crafted their emails. So if I saw somebody's name who worked at Behringer, I knew that person's email.
Yep.
And I emailed them. And the big thing was two things I had going for me. I think was one, I wasn't trying to sell anything.
Mhm.
All I was saying is, hey, if you're doing an event, post them here. It's free. My idea was I'll get advertising. Just
Mhm.
post your stuff. And the second thing was that I actually had some business experience in the wine world. A lot of those .coms in the early days were started by people who liked wine,
Yeah.
but they didn't know shit about wine or any of the business whatsoever. They just thought, well, I like wine. Let's see if I can make a business out of it.
Yeah.
So that added a lot. And then about 6 months in, U.S. News and World Report mentioned it. And this was, again, the early days of the internet. People were trying to figure things out. One of the things that got recognized early on was links to other sites, links to other information sites. So U.S. News and World Report contacted me and said, hey, we talked about your site here. Here's a link, because they wanted me to, basically put a link up.
Yep.
Which I did, and it just, again, I think it gave me some legitimacy at that point that really spiked the numbers. I mean, after that, it just started to grow leaps and bounds.
Oh,
Got
great.
mentioned
That's
in
amazing.
all the newspapers. I mean, U.S. News and World Report, Wall Street Journal, New York Times.
Everywhere.
All, again, just simple ideas. Put them all in one place so people can find out what's
So,
going
so
on.
nowadays, that's basically called social. That's
Yeah.
that's uh, that's basically what you just did. You did
Yeah.
like a social blast, and um,
And it worked.
yeah.
I'm very pleased. And as I
So
said, the
how
first
long ago was this? How long ago that you start these two, or
I went live in July of 2000, and
July 2000?
that
And that
was
was the big time. That
that
was
was
really the big
well,
time for
the
internet.
dot bust had already happened,
Yeah,
but nobody knew it was going to get as bad as it did. I mean,
yeah,
my feeling at the time was if I can get people to my site, I'll have advertisers from the wine world,
right.
Barrington's, Constellations, those kind of things. That proved a lot harder than I expected. Trying to sell ads was problematic. I mean,
Yeah,
it was tough. And then along came Google with their AdSense program, where with just a line of code, they would not only feed me an ad that was relative to wine and food, but also the location. If you were looking at my Napa page, you were looking at an ad, a B&B in Napa,
yep.
uh, and 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 that was a godsend. I mean, that really is what started paying the bills. So, at first I was making $10 a day, and the next thing you know, I'm making $100 a day, and then I'm making $300 a day, and it's like, and I'm doing nothing. I'm making money while I'm sleeping at this point.
Yeah.
People are posting their own events. That's fabulous.
Yeah,
I'm
you're
sending
not
them out.
touching anything.
Don't I?
You're
Not
physically
enough.
not touching anything.
I
But
was just
but no,
driving.
no, let's not take that. You did a lot of work prior.
I did, and I
Right?
kept pushing it. I mean,
We always
you
forget that part. When you become successful, everybody just sees what they have, not what they
no,
went through, right?
you're right. It was a lot of
But
work. I mean,
yeah, I know for
I lived the
sure what
street.
you're going through. I know exactly because we're just here pushing Google, pushing, and I guess I'll bring a little story that I got connected through you guys. I don't even know how I found um, local wine events. It must have I must have searched it. Something that we found you. So
Well,
you guys,
we've always had pretty strong Google position. I paid a lot of attention in the early days, and there was a system back then for identifying the URL.
okay,
Um, and I could get technical on it, but basically we were able to rewrite on the fly that we had a Denver wine related site, Denver wine. Those two keywords were really what was key. Denver wine, Chicago wine. That's how people looked, I'm looking for a wine tasting in Denver, and that's what I did was I wrote it so that Google picked it up as if you say, wine tasting Chicago, I pop up right up
yeah,
on top. And for years I had that. I mean, it was like it was owned, and that truly when I it was called Apache, what was it, mod rewrite. That's what they call it. It was a term that rewrote the URL from a database driven saying, localwineevents.com slant ID number this, that, and the other. It would say localwineevents.com slant Denver wine slant Latour tasting at
mhm,
such and such restaurant. All of those keywords would get picked up by Google,
yeah,
and any of those keywords would then pop me up because Google also recognized the authority of my site. I wasn't spamming. I wasn't
mhm.
doing anything. So it really was a huge benefit. I mean, the traffic spiked on that first year with Google,
Yeah,
and
I
after
bet.
that, that's probably. I mean, if you did a search of any sort, you probably would have come across my site at that point.
Yeah, yeah. So
Did you
yeah,
post
I'm
events?
pretty sure. Yeah, so I got on your site and I did the free side of it. So, obviously, like I said, this is more educational. So for wineries or restaurants, um, anybody that's trying to do an event within our area, you can post on your site without a
Sure.
problem. It's really easy. I put my
And the
pictures up.
people who are seeing it are the people who are local to you. I mean, that
Yeah,
was the whole
exactly.
idea.
And that's it's focused to what we need, our needs, right? Our
Sure.
customer base, our demographics. So it was super easy to do. And then I did a marketing campaign, which was emo blast. I did an emo
Oh,
blast,
okay.
and I think it's Maria that got me
Yeah,
connected
yeah,
to you.
yeah, yeah. Yeah,
Real
she's
nice. She's doing a great job. So she
good.
was really fast. She communicated with me really quick. So I didn't have a problem with. So good job on
Excellent.
hiring her. She's
Excellent.
she's
Yeah,
doing a
yeah,
great
yeah.
job.
She's
Uh,
actually the wife of my programmer now.
okay.
Programmer James has been with me now for she's over 15 years.
Oh, nice. Okay,
I
so they're
went to the
doing a good
show.
job. They're
Yeah,
doing a
she
good
is.
job.
She's a great
So
lady.
I had a Halloween party, and obviously right now is it's pretty crazy because we don't know what's going on, right? We don't know if people are really wanting to go out or
Yeah.
not wanting to go out, and if they do want to go out, what is their sense? Do they want to really be away from people, or
Yeah.
do they not care, or do they just want to wear masks the whole time?
Right.
So
Sure.
I
Yeah,
was
yeah,
trying
yeah.
to respect that, and we got two customers out of it, which was great. Because, and the funny thing is, the customers that came, they asked me how do you get connected to local wines or local wine events? And I said, well, I post things up, and he's like, I said, well, how did you get connected? And he said,
The juice.
I wrote my email somewhere like 6 years ago, and I keep on getting emails from him. And then this just happened to pop up, and we're looking to do something, and it was a Halloween dress up party.
Excellent.
So he's like, it was out of nowhere, and he's coming down from downtown area, San Diego, and
Sure.
we're about 35 miles from there, so about 40 minutes from downtown.
Right.
And I'm just like, and he's like, so was it worth you doing it? That's what he asked me, and I
Yeah.
said, well, it's all gonna be based on you. And I said, and he says, what do you mean? I said, well, if you like their wine, you like the private tasting and party, then most likely you're gonna come back. And if you come back, you're probably gonna bring other people. So
Right.
at the end of the day, yes, it's gonna pay for itself. But if you don't like the wine, you didn't like my personality, you don't like our environment, then you won't come back, and that's it. It's
Right.
done.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
you guys did your job. The local wine event did the juice. They did their job. It's my job to capitalize on it and
Sure.
keep on pursuing it. That was the end of part one with Eric from Local Wine Events. I hope you can see how he was always figuring out ways to help grow wine events throughout the states and why you as a consumer can benefit from local wine events. Make sure to tune in next week to hear part two, where he tells us why you should advertise and sign up for local wine events. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube, iTunes, Google Play channels, and also follow and like us on Facebook and Instagram at Life in a Wine Bottle. Thank you for listening. I'm your host, Nelson Pizarro, and we'll see you guys next week.